Welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm your host, Bridget Burns with the University Innovation Alliance.
And I am Sara Custer, Editor-in-Chief of Inside Higher Ed.
Typically, when we get together, we have a third player hiding in the wing, and it's usually a college president or chancellor who we invite selectively to interview them about what it's like to lead in this moment. We're trying to surface anecdotes, stories, and insights from leaders who are really grappling with the challenges of today. And that's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom. This is going to be a different episode where, in fact, the wisdom is here on the screen, folks. It is just, it's going to be Sara and I actually chatting with each other and catching up on what we're seeing in the sector and what we're most observing that needs to change and what folks are asking for, what we're seeing in the field. And Weekly Wisdom is sponsored by Mainstay, which is a student engagement and retention platform that helps institutions navigate a complex data environment and how you can communicate with students in real time. And it's also sponsored, this show is broadcast later on the Innovating Together podcast, which is supported by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, which we are super grateful for their generosity. So that is Weekly Wisdom and normally what we would talk about. But today, like I said, we're going to be catching up with each other about what's going on. And in particular, I want to start off because Sara, we're both going through, well, first off, I would say the sector is going through a lot of change. And separately, both of our organizations are going through an interesting moment in time. You've been around for 20 something years. And we've been here for 12. So there's a lot happening. So I want to first ask you to just share a little bit about what it's like, what's going on in your world. From what I saw from the headline is that after a very long period of time where Inside Higher Ed was unusual by not charging for subscriptions, like everyone else in media, in the Chronicle of Higher Ed and so many others, you're adapting to the moment, and you are now going to do a subscription model to support the quality journalism that you're providing. I'm sure that had lots of thoughts, but I don't know if folks understand that was frankly weird that you weren't doing that previously. So I just want to what was that like?
Yeah. So Inside Higher Ed has been around for 20 years. I've been around Inside Higher Ed for 2 years. People may or may not know that we were co-founder, led and run and edited for those 20 years. And I think that's probably how it was able to be open access for so long. And that was really part of the mission that Doug Letterman and Scott Jassick had whenever they first launched Inside Higher Ed. They were longtime editorial leaders at the Chronicle before they launched Inside Higher Ed. And it was one of their missions to be intentionally openly available to everybody across the sector. That was in their mission. They even had it on their business cards, free forever, which I'm kind of regretting for them now in the position that we're in. But it also was kind of reflected in the coverage that they did. They intentionally covered institutions that they felt they were not able to cover working at the Chronicle at that time. So that was community colleges, that was open access colleges, that was really getting outside of the elite circle of a few dozen colleges, basically, that they felt they were only focusing on there. So it was kind of a dual mission intention that they had when they started Inside Higher Ed. Also, luckily enough, in 2004, when they launched, the internet allowed for that kind of business model. There was a lot of support and funding coming from digital ad sales, and that is certainly not the world we're in now. So you're right. And in some ways it was unique that it took us this long to get here. But it makes sense. I'm excited about it because it means that we now have a sustainable business model behind our journalism, our independent journalism that can sustain us for another 20 years. And not saying that we were ever in a position where our future was in peril, but you've got to be smart about this, and you've got to be able to set up your business for the long term and put it on a path where, that recurring revenue and subscription revenue is just so much easier to plan for the future whenever you've got that. So it's exciting for us. It's I think it makes us feel a lot more confident. And on the back of that is also the fact that we're doing really good journalism. And I think that the work that we're doing is incredibly valuable. I know that it's valuable to our readers because we hear that all the time and we see it in our traffic figures. So I think something that's valuable should probably be paid for to some extent. And the last thing I'll say on this, because I don't want to make it a huge sales pitch, but we are trying to stick as close to the mission of Inside Higher Ed as we possibly can, and reflecting that in our pricing structure and how the rates that we're offering. We're looking at institutional sales for institutions, but clearly taking into consideration that community colleges may not have as many resources available to them as a big public R1 institution will. So definitely taking that in consideration so that we can make sure that everybody is still getting access to Inside Higher Ed. And we will, of course, still provide a few free articles a month in front of the paywall whenever it launches in April.
So there are a few things that one, I don't know if I've heard the whole story from, and I've known Doug for a long time, but I appreciate that kind of context. And the other is, I think I remember that IHE was really the first to think about going digital and covering things online and not just doing print. So it's interesting that the format, like I know he was experimenting with trying to focus on online, focus on more than just a website that was just static. And then watching the Chronicle follow IHE once that happened, and seeing other publications. So it's interesting to see who the innovators are, and then you bring others along, right? Like the sector, you don't just have one winner. But also, I kind of prefer the subscription model because I'm glad you're thinking about the cost for the individual and the institution. But in the end, I think that being able to select the kind of journalism you want to do based on the people you need to serve, rather than companies that want to promote their products, which I know there still has to be a little bit of that, right? Like in terms of the business model, but like that is where I've really struggled running a nonprofit for a long time, is that there are for-profit entities that see that part of what I do is I run a trust-based network, that a lot of the things that we do go viral. And so it would be attractive for them to want to invest in, as a company, giving us some funding. But I have to always be thinking about, like, no, the work has to actually bubble up from the people who it needs to serve, or it's going to be more of the same, which is just like aggressive marketing and sales and pitching and like kind of missing the picture. So it resonates for me that you're doing the right thing. And I like that you're diversifying the business model. So you're not so contingent on like, well, I guess we're going to do an ad for whatever in the heck this is. And then shape all the content around that. And like I said, you want that balance, that you need that kind of sustainable strategy. And also, as someone who has been here from the start and really fought hard to build a sustainable business model, it is the harder path. It is much more convenient to choose the dopamine hit of cash flow that is not really wrestling with some of these bigger issues. And I also am just thinking about, I know that Doug did not do this to you, of like, hey, I'm going to throw you the keys and then make you make all the hard decisions. But I do see that happen at institutions. I do see that we are often putting off the really difficult, frankly, like don't want to do it decision until we are going to leave it for the next leader to figure out. And that is something we have to wrestle with. And just to be accountable, like I've been here 12 years. I think about that all the time, of like, what are the hard decisions that it would be selfish for me to leave for someone else? And am I actually dancing with those things at the pace that we need me to? And sometimes that's yes, and sometimes that's no. So it's like,
and a lot of times it's about timing as well. I know that Doug and Scott had considered this possibility more than a couple of times, and maybe it just wasn't the right decision. And some of it was philosophical for them. And some of it was also like, there are still other avenues that we can pursue here and that we can do here that will help us sustain what we're doing, so that we don't have to go down that road. And the timing was just right for right now. Yeah.
What I appreciate is that both of us are going through these business model evolution. All it does is make us more empathetic to the campuses who are in the field, because, the topic is different, but you had to deal with probably the same stuff. You set a vision, we're going to make a decision, you got to figure out how to make it work.
Yep.
Now you got to also worry about internally making sure you get everyone on board.
Yep.
And then there's going to be somebody who doesn't agree with it. And then you got to deal with like the internal politics.
Yep.
And then you got to figure out the right pace for adoption.
Yep.
And I see campuses wrestle with this all the time. It is not easy to make any change. And in fact, I think the easy path is no change. And that is why you should be more concerned about the places that are not changing. Then we always focus on the ones who are making the change and like, that's get the splash. They're the ones doing the hard part. The calm, quiet should be actually, frankly, more concerning.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Bridget. And it's something that was definitely one of our kind of points because, it was a difficult year for the sector. And when you're a business that is kind of ancillary to that sector and benefits from a sector, if the sector that you benefit from is not doing well, you do not do well either. And so you got to make changes. And yes, maybe it's easier to kind of stick to what Inside Higher Ed has always been, but that's not going to work. You have to make change, and change is difficult and painful sometimes, but necessary. And I want to switch it back to you though, Bridget, because I know that you guys are also having some business model shifts. So tell us what you guys are doing.
Well, I mean, it's after 12 years of I think it's a weird thing where you go through this process. We started and we set a big public goal. It was supposed to end in 2025. We accomplished that goal in 2020. At 2020, when we were supposed to graduate 68,000 more graduates than we were on track to in 2014 when we first set it. So we hit that goal in 2020. And at that point, then and only then could we consider adding more campuses. So we focused on, nailed it and continued to measure from the original institutions. So we actually just went back through where that goal was originally 2025. It turns out that instead of 68,000, we hit 164,000 of the same core institutions, not even the new ones, not counting any of the new ones, which is great. It just means that we weren't ambitious enough on the front end. Because I remember people questioning like how real that was and how possible it was at the time. But then the question is like, well, what if you built something that actually works and does something that is unusual? You could sunset it. Take the W, walk it off, but it was starting to become so clear that there was something very special here about the level of mutual ambition and holding each other accountable. And that there was really no limit to the number of things that were new problems that people needed to tackle together. And the appetite for the campuses continue to grow. So really I had to wrestle with okay, it would be a nice story with a beginning, middle, and end to wrap it up, take the W, share what we learned. But they wanted to keep going, and they wanted to go even faster and further on areas that are newer. So what we're having to evolve is, instead of measuring our success by degrees and graduates, we now have to measure by post-college mobility and the prosperity of our states and the leadership role these institutions play. And those are two very ambiguous buckets where it turns out there are not clear measures. And they are, and I thought that I was going to show up to the mobility conversation several years in. Raj Shetty first came to us when he was first starting his work years ago and actually presented to the UIE campuses and did some work with a few of them. I thought that this field would be more mature. I thought that I would be able to show up, round the bases, and then now we will adopt whatever the nationally accepted standard of measuring mobility is. And we would then use that to set a target and then interrogate all of our systems to figure out how to improve post-college mobility. And Sara, that is not actually where I am today, because it turns out that is not as far along. And in fact, there are a bunch of different ways, and there are a bunch of different people who are doing all kinds of cool things. And while we have done lots of experiments and there are new things available, I am judging by a higher standard of, it has to be free. It has to be in the water supply. Graduates and degrees are in the water. That is how we measure ourselves. It is part of the culture and the values. I'm not selling anything to try and tell you that that's what you should aspire to. And I think that there are a lot of cool things that you could use to measure mobility. Many of them cost money. And we have to do everything we do has to be affordable for an institution we'll never know, a rural institution, a community college. Like, it has to be like something that is useful to every. We think that students at every institution in the country deserve innovative solutions. So we shouldn't choose something that's expensive and fancy for just our institutions, because then we're not actually doing our mission of actually like changing what ideas are scaled and what innovation it, serves students and making it accessible. So that's my shift is how do you evolve your business model in the midst of changing what your scoreboard is? And the whole time, funders are changing their theories of change and their strategies very rapidly. There's massive turnover in the philanthropy space. I don't understand it. All I know is I have one program officer who I have historically had a long-term relationship with. And I think we have 10 national funders we're working with.
Yeah.
So we have all these grants, and it's so many new people. And it's fabulous to work with new folks, but it is hard to it's just hard to do the kind of like deep innovation work we want to do if I'm still starting with explaining the very basics of the model all the time. So
and the fact that you're now shifting your model adds some complexity to that. I wanted to ask you though, Bridget, like there are a lot of models out there for calculating mobility. So tell me why, for example, the college scorecard isn't going to work, or what Raj Chetty is doing. Like what gaps are out there for you that means whatever's out there right now won't work?
It's just that there's not a resolute, clear gold standard, right? Like, what's iPads for this? What is the thing that every campus is going to use unequivocally so that we are all on the same standard? One of the examples we used early on that is more problematic now was Weight Watchers. It's just weighing on the same scale, right? It is difficult to equivocate to here's the thing I've done, and and explaining it in a simplistic way so other people can use it. But if we're all measuring by different things, if we're all trying different experiments here and there, and I have the more expensive measurement system, and you have you're opting into this optional one, there are some really cool things. Like one of the goals my campuses have talked about is every one of them aspiring to the Carnegie's new classification opportunity campuses. It's still one moment in time, that mobility measure, right? It is not a consistent it's not static and dynamic. And that's possibility. There's a lot going on in this space. I would say, so it's not a lack of effort or investment or experiments. But again, I just thought that my work was going to be different. It was to be about how to support a collective of institutions to figure out the messier and murkier part, which is not how to measure it, is how do you actually know what you're doing is actually changing mobility versus are you reading your own press? Because people do a lot of stuff. They all think, oh, I've got this program for boobity bop, and we have this young scholars program, and we also are, and they all have the things they brag about like our graduates are blah, 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 well, how do you know? And when they are honest, institution leaders are like, you know what, actually, no, like, I know that we're not doing a good enough job helping students feel confident and informed about the degree they're going to choose and what kind of job to get. We have, internships are great, but there's not enough quality and supply of that I can guarantee that. We have to break down the silo between the classroom and how students are preparing themselves for work. These two are not, these need to actually connect, right? Because what we're teaching them is connected. It is not, we're still very uncomfortable admitting that's what we do. So it's just, I feel like that was the work I was wanting to do. And evaluating different data providers and companies and different platforms and figuring out how to raise money to get Stepping Blocks or Burning Glass or CredLens, where I'm really hopeful about CredLens, which seems to be like possibly one of the giant killers in terms of a way to measure everything. It's different work than I expected to do.
Yeah. And it's so much more complicated than just measuring graduation rates, which is complicated in itself. But if we're talking about mobility, that is, there's a lot in there, and it's kind of choosing what you want to be the indicator of mobility. And then, like you said, making everybody get behind it and agree that that's what they're going to be following and working towards.
Yeah. People do follow what we do goes viral. And this is not my expertise. Like Rashidi is so much smarter about it. There are so many people who are way smarter about how to measure this. And I keep, listening to them, but I do not want to make this decision. I'm not going to. What I'm helpful at is helping a group of institutions who all are in their own states, dealing with their own stuff, team up to set a combined goal and hold each other accountable, and then figure out exactly how we will get there to redesign our institutions so that we actually are providing a far superior experience for students to get to upward mobility. Like that's what I can do. I spent 12 years, I could do that. And I find that I am showing up now like, okay, I am in conversations that as a student, I am learning a lot, but I was really just hoping it was more mature than this. But you get what you get. And
roll with the punches. Roll with the punches, and this is leadership dynamism that is testing new skill sets for you. And it sounds like you're rising to the challenge. Are you enjoying it?
Oh, I mean, the reason I love my job is because it's weird every day. Like every day is different. The things I'm wrestling with and how to connect and support our work, it changes so much, and that appeals to my the way that I'm just like an infinitely curious person. And so there's just something new to figure out. What about you? Like I'm sure you signed up for this job and you were told like, here's what an editor looks like. Here's what a CEO looks like. And I don't know what that image of that job was, but what how is it different? And what is the part that is most fun for you?
Yeah. I think certainly you go into these roles and you kind of have an image of what you think, what kind of box you think you should be fitting into as an editor-in-chief. What is my concept of editor-in-chief? Am I fitting into that? But also, the position that my predecessors were in for 20 years. And so it's kind of dual, like, well, how did they do it? Should I do it like that? Or how do I think an editor-in-chief would do this? Should I do it like that? Versus, gosh, what just feels normal and like natural to me. So there are kind of always three kind of competing fiddles there. Thankfully, being in the job for 2 years now, that third one is coming through more clearly now for me as I get more comfortable in the role and my position in it and my confidence in it. I would say my favorite part of the job is being in the newsroom with the journalists and with the reporters and just talking about our coverage and what stories we've got coming up and how we're going to cover them and how we're going to serve our readers. And when I get to edit pieces, really enjoy that. I've started writing a column of my own editor's note once a week, which is a fun challenge. But getting back to whenever you start to climb the career ladder, you get further away from the stuff that got you in the job to begin with. So I also enjoy leading an organization. I enjoy leadership. I enjoy strategizing. I enjoy managing people. But I also really enjoy getting back to be in touch with, why I got into this business to begin with. And also just higher education. Like, how lucky are we that we work in higher education with universities and colleges? Like, these institutions are fascinating and they're so important to everything that this country is and the lives in this country and around the world. And I don't want to sound too grandiose about this, but they're just wonderful institutions and they're full of fascinating people that are super passionate and are doing real like humanist work. And I just feel like as our economy kind of shifts more towards AI stuff. And there was a really good editorial in the New York Times over the weekend about how capitalism is whatever this modern version of capitalism is, that it's not really selling widgets anymore, or selling cards or building railroads. It's kind of financial companies kind of benefiting off of fictitious transactions and just making money off of transactions and kind of just non-tangible things. Higher education is the furthest thing away from that you can possibly be. And just how lucky are we to have our careers here?
Well, I agree. I mean, I'm super biased and have always been. I can't really see it. I try and call out that I'm not really neutral. It changed my life. And it's such a privilege to every time your version of the newsroom is every time I get to go on campus and I get to see like the incredible stuff happening. And what I love of most of all is when they're finding something that's broken or not working and actually fixing it and seeing just kind of the generosity of spirit and like just how much people care and their ability to just like pull water from a rock in terms of like, I don't have time for this. I'm not paid to do this. I don't even know how to fix this, but I'm going to pull together anyone available because students need us too. And just their willingness to like, just do whatever it takes. And I think that it's hard because as soon as you start talking about what a privilege to be in higher ed, I because I'm spending time with campuses, I know that they are feeling a little different, not because they're not grateful, but because it feels so painful to watch the real attacks. And they and the feeling of just how challenging it is for them to exist in American higher education in this moment, because it does feel like it's consistently under attack from the public, from policy, from their business model, governance, boards. I mean, there's just so much. So I think it's really helpful when folks on the outside, like you and myself, remind them of just, not like, I'm not trying to gaslight them, but I do think it's important to remind them, oh yeah, there's a different perspective. Like actually, it's still great. It's still worth fighting for. And the bones are rock solid in terms of the transformative effect of what this place does. So I think I wanted to wrap by just asking you're getting a chance to see what campuses are interested in clicking and reading, what you're seeing people are asking you to cover. I guess we could just wrap by talking about the trends that we're observing for this moment in terms of what higher ed is wrestling with and like, you're getting a lot of pressure to cover.
Yeah. So, I mean, the obvious answer with that is federal policy and everything that's happening, especially with the one big, beautiful bill and all of the regulatory changes that are coming with that. I think that is the boulder hurtling down the hill towards institutions coming in July 1. I figure a lot of listeners probably already know about a lot of that. So I'll just kind of earmark that and move on to some other ones that are trends that I think are still going on in the background that maybe get less attention from folks like me. AI remains a big thing. And I think the federal policy stuff and just general attacks on the sector throughout 2025 perhaps distracted observers like myself from what's happening with AI, but I'm pretty sure that probably happened on other campuses just because there's only so much bandwidth people have. But there are other people, other institutions that are managing to do both, respond to the current moment, but also look more towards the future and really try to think about AI. And we're seeing lots of different approaches to it. Campuses signing on enterprise contracts with places like OpenAI or Anthropic with Claude. We're seeing other institutions be a bit more circumspect around it, maybe not signing on wholesale to with platforms like that. Others are kind of leaving it up to individual professors still to figure out how they want to use it in their classrooms, or they've got little pockets of adoption with different platforms. I think one thing that's interesting to me, and we've actually got an event that we're going to be doing with the University at Buffalo in June on this, is what role does higher education have right now in this moment to try to shape the trajectory of AI as it's developing? We know that institutions are where the greatest minds exist and the greatest thinkers, not just from a tech perspective, but morally, philosophically, social scientists. What can higher education institutions, what agency do they have to really help society grapple with this and take some responsibility to make sure that this is a technology that can actually benefit human beings and really be a tool for flourishing creativity, whatever it is, rather than this like horrible future that the tech giants are telling us is going to happen in 2 years. All of our jobs are going to be taken over by robots. So I know that you guys are also doing a lot of work in this area, Bridget, especially around AI.
Well, I was just going to try and put in here, a lot of what I do is just actually like what are the problems that everyone has, and try and create things that are their ideas based on what they're seeing needs to exist in the world. And so we actually have publicly already released this. You can go to the uia.org if you want. And if you're not on our newsletter, I mean, you're missing out. I think it's the best newsletter out there. But I wanted to make it so that you could understand kind of exactly what it is that we're sharing. And it's we've created a AI vendor diagnostic that is publicly available for you. So it's just a tool for presidents and chancellors to share with their team of what you need to know, and then actually like how to evaluate the decisions about AI navigation. Here are the questions you should ask. I think the most important one I would say is ask them, I'm talking to your competitor, what question should I ask them that I've not asked you? That's for both GPT, or for both OpenAI and Google. Specific questions and things you can, a checklist for you and your team. All of this is just basically kind of how we operate, of like, this is a shared problem, and if somebody doesn't figure this out, we're all in trouble. So with us, everything is kind of open source. Like, take it, use it, rip it up, make it better, whatever. No one paid us to do that. It was just solving a problem in real time, and already over 100 institutions have downloaded it and used it. Fabulous, awesome. I'm more interested in how they would make it better, like what question is missing and what else is needed next. But I agree with you. AI, that's the thing. Everyone's talking about it. I do think I heard from Erin Moat from Innovate EDU, and she runs the EdSafe Alliance. And basically that everyone's focused right now on efficiency, but we need to think about these bigger questions around we're signing contracts that are going to give away our IP, that are giving away student data for decades to come. These are big questions that nobody's prepared to answer. And in resource scarce environment, when they're going to give you a little bit of money, you can make the wrong decision. And so we just want to make sure that the field is adapting. I think beyond the AI question, what's dominating right now as we wrap up is a real prevalence of the conversation around work-based learning and workforce alignment, and how we shift our relationship with the public. You're seeing all kinds of efforts. Fabulous. I would just say, from my vantage point, work-based learning is super important, but it is a term that is not a higher education term. It is actually from the workforce sector. It is not, like, for the longest time, I was like, why is higher ed not in here? Well, because this is not actually what we call it. And we actually need a strategy here to increase the supply of it and the quality of it. And it is, I would say, a nascent space in many ways, and worth everyone actually thinking about how we not have this done to us. Because I see a lot of those conversations, and I'm looking around the room of who's in, and it's not the institutions, because we're off busy doing the education stuff. And it turns out that I think the future of higher ed campuses, we have to be the future of apprenticeship, because AI is eliminating those first jobs. What's it going to look like if we actually are needing to create first jobs for every student who is on our campuses? So those are just a few thoughts. I hope that this has been helpful for folks at home in terms of, two organizations going through, maturing navigation, very relatable for our sector, and look forward to the next time we get together, where we're able to interview another leader and tee up some of these broader questions. As always, Sara, you're the best. Thanks so much for being a great co-host. And for those folks at home, we look forward to talking to you soon.
It's been a pleasure, Bridget, as always. Thank you.
See ya.